Welcome to Go-to-Market Institute. My name is Mick Bono, and we're continuing this course on how to conduct effective customer and user interviews. So this is session 3, and we're going to continue talking about planning customer interviews. But before, let's do a quick recap. Previously, in session 2, we talked about how to formulate business and research objectives for your customer interview. We discussed how to think about selecting the right audiences and what are the factors that might impact you in your selection of the right audience, depending on the business and research outcomes. We also discussed customer psychographics and 4 frameworks to think about analyzing and understanding how the customers feel, what they think, and what type of context in which they make decisions. Now, in today's session, we're going to do a deep dive on problem and pain analysis. We're going to talk about 5 question types. We'll discuss projective techniques. We're going to build an interview script, and I will provide 9 tips for creating effective interviews questions. And number 9, we're going to put it all together in a customer interview strategy outline. But before, let me remind you that the mission for Go-to-Market Institute is to empower entrepreneurs and go-to-market teams with strategies and tactics to build, market, and grow great products. And before we start, I encourage you to like and subscribe if you find this information helpful. Please leave questions in the comments and I will definitely respond to them. And for some questions that require larger context, I will create a separate video. And I will also provide templates that you'll be able to get looking at a description of this video. All right, so let's talk about how to do a deep analysis on product and pain. And there are 3 ways of doing it. We're going to talk about awareness and urgency of the problem, how likely they are to buy and try something depending on that. We're going to talk about frequency and severity, what kind of impact that problem has on the target audience and organization. And then we're going to talk about 6 ways to analyze a pain and a problem in order to get better perspective. All right, so first one is awareness and urgency. When you're trying to get information from a customer around the problems, you also want to understand how aware they are of this particular problem you're trying to solve and how urgent it is. And if you create this 2x2 and you have on a x-axis, you'll have urgency from high to low and awareness and the y-axis from low to high, you will be able to break down 4 different types of problem. So if the problem has low urgency and low awareness, we're talking about latent problem, meaning that the customer have a problem but don't know about it. Now, if you have a low urgency but high awareness, we're talking about passive problem, meaning that the customer is aware that the problem exists, but they aren't motivated for some degree to solve this problem. And then in ideal situation, you have 2 types of problem where the awareness is high and urgency is high. One of them active problems. An active problem or pain are those that the customer is aware about and they are searching for solution, but maybe they haven't done anything yet to address it. Maybe they haven't done anything yet. And then you have vision problem. And the vision problem is when you have an idea, it's when you're aware of the problem and it's has a high urgency because you're aware of the problem and you have an idea and you are taking some steps in order to solve this pain or problem. Maybe you're evaluating some products, maybe you're trying to build a homegrown solution, but you have done something. So the reason why it is important to think about awareness and urgency when analyzing pains and doing the customer interviews, because you want to understand how this problem fits in everything else that the customer needs to do. So if the problem has a high awareness, that means that you don't have to educate the customer about the problem. And if they have high urgency, that means that you don't have to convince them to take an action on that problem. The second framework is analyzing pain in terms of frequency and severity. The frequency is about how often this pain occurs, and the severity or impact is all about how big is this problem when it occurs. And similarly, if you create 2x2, you will have 3 different categories of problems. So if you have low frequency and high impact or high severity, you have severe but not frequent problem. And examples could be office relocation. That means that companies do not often change offices, but when they do, it's a huge problem because you have to move all the equipment and all the furniture from one place to another. Similarly, it could be in event organizing. The company might have only one event a year, but creating an event and hosting an event has a lot of difficulties and pains. You have to organize, you have to record, you have to find people. And so this is an example of pain that's severe but not frequent. And similarly with security, data breaches, or data loss, where you don't want this to happen too often, but when it does, it's really a big deal for organizations. So the severity of this is high. Now, you also have types of problems or pain that are frequent but not severe. Think about managing assets or managing documents remotely, or trying to manage signatures. Like, this is maybe not necessarily something that happens frequent. This is actually something that happens frequent in your organization, but they're not severe. You learn how to live with those problems, and they're not necessarily that big. So sometimes when solving those problems, they're just nice to have. So a better UI, for example. And then the ideal situation when the pain and problem you're trying to analyze and try to get out of the customer interviews have high frequency and high severity, meaning they happens often and the problem is huge. And this is the great example here would be managing customer relationship. If you have ever tried to manage customer relationship for a smaller organization, I've done it through Excel files. Yes, it's super difficult to do. That's why customer relationship management is a separate category, and it's all frequent and severe problem. And that's why there is so much success in this area. So when you do analyzing your pains and problems that the customer has, think about frequency and severity of them as well. Now, in order to do a deeper pain and problem analysis, I use this 6-step framework. First, I'm trying to understand what this problem prevents a customer from achieving their objectives, how this problem prevents them to, or what objectives they're trying to achieve. Second is I'm trying to understand the context in which this problem occurs. Then you want to understand the priority of the problem compared to everything else that the customer prospect has to do. Then you want to understand the success factors and how would you estimate the success of you solving this pain and problem. Number 5 is what are the current alternatives? Does the company use competitives? Are they using anything at all to solve this pain and problem? And number 6, how the decisions are made. What are the buying process is like. The first, let's do a breakdown on objectives. So the objective is important because problem and pain typically prevents people from achieving some goals and objectives. So you want to understand what the end game is. What's the promised land for your ideal, for the customer you interview? What objectives did they need to achieve in that role? And what ideal solution look like? What does the success look like for them? And what does the promised land look like for them? So when you think about the problem, try to understand like what are the high level objectives that the customer has. An example of question here could be, tell us the last time you had a project where you managed tons of design assets. What were your goals? This is an opportunity for me to test this particular problem on a high level objective that I'm trying to figure out. Like, if I'm building a product, for example, or I'm thinking of building a product for easy managing brand assets or creative assets between the teams, I'm trying to first understand like what are the objectives for the teams for managing those types of assets. Are they trying to do a redesign? Are they trying to build a new marketing campaign? So first of all, try to figure out the objectives. Now, second is context, and the context is key to understanding hidden agenda and forces. You want to understand what other things are happening while the problem and pain occurs. Is it pain shares between team members? How does the workflow look like for this process right now? And what else is impacted by the outcome of this project and decision? So the example for context, and again, I'll use a brand asset management company as an example here. A couple question example here are, tell us how many assets you had to manage, how big the team was, internal and external. What was the budget for this project? Did they complete the project on time? If not, what are the other problems did you face? is the problem of sharing assets exists between external and external stakeholders. So those types of questions will help you understand the context in which the pain and the problem occurs. Now, the third one is priority. Priority shows the importance and the level of pain the customer feels, how big the problem relative to other things. In order to understand that, it's good to use ratings and ranking questions for you to ask the customer, highlight and rate the highest problem they have, and then you'll be able to see where the problem you're trying to solve will fit. And if the problem that you're trying to solve not in the top 3 or top 5 of the customer priority, that means this is either the wrong customer you're talking to, or you want to change what kind of problem you want to solve because this is not big enough of a problem. An example of question could be, tell us about what are the other problems came up in that project. How do you rate this problem on scale 1 to 5, for example? Or how do you rank the 3 problems that we just recently discussed? Number 4, or a continuation of the priority and questions. This is a couple of exercises that you can do or during the customer interviews that will help you prioritize the problem. You can do individual ratings, you can do sorting exercise, highlighting, you can do the rating and then ask them to rate and then discuss. You can also probe to understand and ask why, look for the reasons, why you do that and not that. And finally, consider review the least favorite thing. Those types of techniques that will be helpful for you to understand priority of the particular pain and problem. Number 4 is success factors and KPIs. It will help you understand product solution and evaluation process. Every meaningful product needs to drive an outcome, and in order to drive outcome, you need some sort of measurement. How would you present the clients before and after? Are you helping them save money? Are you helping them with saving time? Are you improving their ROI in some way, one way or another? So how would you measure this pain before and after? This is what you need to think about, and what are the critical KPIs and OKRs that this target customer would have in order to evaluate this problem and evaluate potentially your product and your solution to that problem? So the examples here could be, tell us about how you manage creative assets during the last project. This is related again to this example of brand asset management company. The other example would be, how would you measure the productivity and success of the project? What made this project successful? So the fourth element is alternatives. Alternatives are important because they will help you understand what companies or target audiences does or is not doing to solve this problem. The biggest alternative that comes in the marketplace is still not doing anything, and most of the customers are not doing anything. Some customers are using competitors and some will have a homegrown solution. Typically those 3 types of categories, and for the most part in a lot of industries the largest option is not taking any action. So the questions that will help you probe for alternatives would be, tell us where you keep your creative assets. Again, this is an example for brand asset management. Or describe if you're using any internal, external product managing assets like Google Drive. Tell us, how do you manage assets when they live across many destinations? Email, hard drive, laptop, and so forth. And finally, the 6th element of analyzing pain and problem during the customer interviews is learning about decision making and sales process. It is important to get insight into your buying process and buying roles and approvals and methods, because it will be essential for you to understand how the customers are making decision to buy one product versus the other. So ask them about the last time they had to buy similar products. You can ask them about who will be responsible for this problem in their organization. Ask who selected product currently used, if they have a competitor. Ask about typical buying process, how much they spend on it, what if the product above the budget, who needs to approve it, do they have a purchasing department, how that operate, and what the process looks like. So examples of buying decision and sales processes would be, tell us Who manages the assets on your team? How often your team use corporate credit card, or what is the limit that you would have on your credit card to make a purchase for the product? Next, I would like to talk and share with you 5 different question types and techniques. So as you're gonna start thinking about creating your customer interview script, it's important to think about the most popular or most important types of questions. The first question type that we're going to talk about is open-ended question, and this is the most important because open-ended questions allows you to get a story-like answer. You be able to dig deeper. You might get information that you haven't known about previously, and typically those questions starts with why, how, where, when, tell us about, or describe, or explain. And this is the most effective customer question type for customer interviews. And I would say that about 80% of the research in the customer interview and discussions happens with open-ended question. It is the most important element and the most important question type that is out there. The second question type is closed-ended question. And I think the main point here, when we talk about closed-ended question, this is a question that would be answered with yes and no. And you want to limit or quite frankly avoid closed-ended question because you're not going to get a lot of information if you just like, hey, do you use it? It's a yes or no question. You want to get story behind it. You want to get more context and insights from the customer when you do customer interviews. So if you're just going to ask yes or no question, you're just going to get a quick answer, and then it's going to be difficult for you to elicit more information about it. But there's going to be some instances where this question type will be helpful for you. Another question type is rating questions. So the rating questions are good for getting quantifiable data that you can compare. It allows standardized responses, evaluate and benchmark the options. So you can use simple scale rating from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and you basically present those problems or pains and allow or potential solutions and allow customers or prospects on the interview to rank them from 1 to 5. You can also I would say that you want to limit the amount of questions or amount of elements that you want people to rank to about 5 to 3, because the more you ask, the more difficult it is for our brain to compare options. The examples of questions here are that how would you rate your experience with X? Could be a problem, or could be a product, whatever. Or how would you rate this problem from 1 to 5? Another is ranking questions. The ranking is a great technique when your goal is to force prioritization. So when you rate question, you just separately, independently rate different problems from 1 to 5, but you might have 3 or 4 problems that ranked at the highest level. Now, when you do ranking questions, that basically forces the customer and prospect to prioritize one problem versus the other. And the big thing to consider here that it's a very mentally taxable exercise, meaning like it takes a lot of mental capacity to make this comparison. So use it just once per customer interviews, and do not use more than 5 options to rank. And I think that ideal number is about 3. The instances when you want to use the ranking is that the options could be very similar in value. So again, you could have them rate problems from 1 to 5, and then you have 3 problems that rated with the highest number 5. While the ranking of those 5 will give you a better analysis of actually what do they care about most. And this is why the ranking questions I prefer actually more often than not to the rating questions. All right, an example here could be, you said there are 3 top problems. Would you rank them from biggest to lowest? Or what is the most important problem you're trying to solve here? This is the example of the question that will require the customer to think about and to provide priorities to the problem. So this is you're going to have a link here to extra reading, but this is some analysis that was done that basically said that it takes a lot, the more options you have in the ranking questions, the more difficulty it's mental is for the customers to make that comparison. So if you have to prioritize more number of choices, the more choices, the mental capacity for that increases exponentially. So try to, in my experience, I'm trying to do rating questions only with 3, maximum 5 options. I'll never do more than that. And if you have to do more than that, you probably want to restructure your interview or interview questions to have less choices. All right, so lettering question. So lettering question is a series of structured probes designed to uncover the underlying reason behind the customer's preferences, behaviors, and attitudes. There's 2 ways of doing it. One is rephrasing. This is where you are rephrasing questions in a different way and get information from customers that way, and you basically verifying something you have heard from them, but also you probing a different angle of that pain and problem. And the second one that's quite often, and you probably have heard, is a why 5 techniques, where you asking why 5 times in a row, and you probe deeper and deeper the hidden forces behind the customer decision, so behind the customer values, so why they need to solve this problem, why this problem is important to them. So the lettering process typically works in 3 steps. First, you trying to test the attitudes, and the first questions will basically be around, you ask about attributes of the product and service and what they find appealing about them. So for example, interviewer could say, what specific features for your smartphone do you find most useful? And the customer says, I really appreciate the high resolution camera on my phone, right? So this is an attribute, and this is the first sort of step of lettering question. The second is consequences. So you probe deeper by asking about the consequences of those attributes. Like, yeah, you said you like this camera, but why so? This involves understanding how the product features affect the customer's life, which could be positive and negative outcomes on experience as a result of using the product. So the interviewer could ask, why is having high resolution camera important to you? And the customer answer could be, it allows me to capture clear and detailed photos of my family's important moments. The third level of lettering and probing questions are around values. You'll explore the values that underpin those consequences that you have learned in a previous step. The steps delving into the customer personal drivers and motivation, which might include their broader life goals, aspirations, beliefs that are important to them. The example could be here, interviewer could say, why is capturing clear and detailed photos of this moment so important? And the customer's response could be, it's important to me to preserve these memories so I can share them with future generations. And it makes me feel like I'm keeping up with my family legacy. Now, let's talk about projective techniques. So projective techniques are the set of qualitative research methods to uncover subjective and subconscious beliefs, desires, motivations, and attitudes about ambiguous stimuli. They provide deeper insight into how your customers think and feel about problems and products. And some of the techniques that we're going to discuss here today will be sentence completions, withdrawal, new perspective, alternative universe, lettering 5 why questions that we just discussed, and uninterrupted observations, or typically known as usability testing. And there's a couple others I'm not going to cover, but you can probably research that yourself. There's also word association, role playing, and imagery picture interpretation that might be helpful. There's some information that you can find around those projective techniques depending on what your business and research objective is for the customer interviews. But let's talk about how to use projective techniques. So why is more important than what? So the most important is not the answer, but the explanation of why the answer was given. And only use one projective technique per interview so that you would not confuse or exhaust the customer on the call. And also would like to give you a little bit of a framework or background if you have an existing or a new product. For existing products, it's Use projective techniques before diving deep into the pains of the problems. This way you will be able to get some explanation on why before you get into the how they use the product right now, what the current pains. And if you are building, or if you want to build a new product idea or concept, use projective techniques at the as an essential initial assessment of pain and problem. So use it before you go into the deep pain and problem analysis. All right, the first projective technique is sentence completion. Sentence completion works well with the current products and helps to learn about unmet needs and feelings. So the examples are, you give something like, when I use this product, I feel X. The last time I had to deal with this problem, I felt blank. When somebody asks me about this problem, pain or product, I say blank. My job will be so much easier if this product problem blank. So those you're setting up the customer on the call with this sentence completions, and you get the responses that allow you to sort of understand their unmet needs and feelings. Number 2 is a withdrawal, and withdrawal is a good for existing products to test pains and problems and probes for deep emotional belief. So there's a couple withdrawal technique that I like to use. One is the problem related. So imagine this problem and pain has been solved. And how would you work changed? How solving this problem would affect you? How would you feel if this problem no longer exists? You see, those types of withdrawal question basically says, you have this problem. What if we'll remove this problem? How would this make you feel? Now, withdrawal technique also could be product related, and this is if you are trying to analyze a competitor or you're interviewing the customers more around the product you already have. And then imagine you remove this product. You don't have that product anymore. How would your work change? How would you be affected? How would you feel about it? You see, we're trying to, again, probe for deep emotional benefit of withdrawing, this time based on a product, not on the problem. Third projective technique is new perspective. New perspective is best for new concept and ideas, prospects, and it's about learning utility and value proposition. So introducing a new concept. Imagine using this product for a year. How pleased are you with this product? How would this product improve your life? So this will allow you to get a perspective that the customer would be expected if they would be satisfied and pleased with this product in a year, what kind of value and utility this product would have. And that's a projective technique is useful. Number 4 is alternative universe. The alternative universe questions are good for existing and new products. Helps to learn about potential innovation and needs a potential innovation for new and current products. So this is how it goes. Imagine a situation where you have the power and resources to solve this problem. How would you solve this problem? How would you change this product? Or in an ideal world, how would this problem be solved? So you basically empower mentally the customer and or prospect to think about the problem, or think about the problem in a way that gives them unlimited power. They can have unlimited resources, and they have all the resources to solve this problem. How would they solve this problem? And this is a helpful information for you to think about how the customer thinks about the solving their own problem. Remember, we talked about the fact that you don't want to customer what to build, what features and what product, but you do want to understand the problem. With this projective alternative universe, you basically give them an idea of how they would think about this problem given unlimited resources, and you can use this information in terms of thinking about how you can improve your product or what can you do differently. So number 5 is projective technique is laddering and 5 whys. And laddering is a technique that asks multiple why questions in order to get to root cause analysis. And you ask why and why it is important. We briefly talked about it already, but let me give you another example here. An interviewer could be asking, what do you like the least in your current content publishing process? And the customer says, I hate that it takes so much time. Why does it take so much time? Well, as a content marketer, I have to manage content calendars, come up with ideas, manage contractors, publish, format content, schedule, promote, and then create reports. Why do you manage everything in content production? Well, we don't have any resources for content marketing or to hire anybody. Interviewer could ask, why don't you have more resources? Well, I did ask for more resources, but top management doesn't see the value in content marketing yet. They feel it's a less ROI positive than some other channels because it takes longer to show ROI. So the interviewer might ask why top management doesn't feel or see the ROI from current marketing. And the customer might report, well, our reporting is limited. The top management doesn't understand the compounding interests of content marketing over time. So what is the key insight here? The insight here that the customer user doesn't have good reporting that can prove ROI to the top management. And that's what causes in this particular situation them to have problems because they cannot prove ROI, they cannot get resources, and if they cannot get resources, they cannot do more content, and that's why they need to do all of it by themselves. So one of the key insights of this interview is how can we give more tools for the customer or the user to showcase the ROI of their work and the problem they solve and how they grow the organization so they can showcase it to top management. You see how 5 why techniques help to uncover that helpful insight that would probably be a result of improving your new features or your product. Now, projective technique number 6 is uninterrupted observation of existing product. And typically, this is what I would call the usability testing. The uninterrupted observation are basically a way for you to look how the customers interact with the product and maybe ask some follow-up questions. So the process usually goes like this. Well, dear customers, we will listen and we'll ask you just to complete some task, and we'll ask you, and you can ask them whether you want them to narrate that. So a couple of examples here. Ask customers to walk through how they use your product. Ask customers to show you how they would go about achieving X inside of the product. So don't tell them whether they like it or not. Just tell them, hey, can you publish content in using our product? Also ask them to narrate while they're using the product. Sometimes people will try to talk out loud the thing that confuses them, and you'll uncover some of insight in that format. Then listen and take notes. Try to not to interrupt, provide hints. That is important. You know your product, you know how to use it, but try to avoid to helping them. Even if it's obvious where to do something inside of the product, avoid it because you're gonna uncover some information that might be a surprise for you. Something that you thought was very obvious for you, but not very obvious for your customer or user. And then debrief, ask clarifying questions as a part of this process. So uninterrupted observation is mostly used on existing products, and it's action-based, and it allows you to understand how customers use your product and what might be confusing in the current environment. All right, so now it's time to build an interview script. We talked about in session 1 about the business objective and the research objective. We talked about how to think and select the right audience to do customer interviews. We also looked about potential company size and where the customer and what industry they're in. Now, in this session, we talk about different types of questions. Now, you need to think about how to structure like interview screen together. First, a quick reminder that your interview should be around 30 minutes. I put 45 minutes sometimes when you book a call with the customers for 30 minutes and it goes a little bit longer. If you ask them and they are okay, maybe you would be able to expand and have a little bit more questions, but think about 30 minutes as a target. But think about who's going to be driving the team, who's going to be participating in the customer interviews. Often there's only one person who asks the question and drives the interview, and typically it's either founder, if it's entrepreneur, or it's a product manager. Then you might have other participants, but make sure that they're not interrupting. They're also more of a silent participants. And try not to have too many people, like try not to have 5, 6 people interviewing your customers because it could be feeling overwhelmed. But typically, if you get on a call and you have somebody who drive an interview, you might have 1 or 2 people there just listening firsthand. And what I like to do is when I have a customer interviews with a team, I have a Slack open sometimes and I let the people to think about follow-up questions and they send it to me. And while I drive the customer interviews, I can see if it makes sense to incorporate some of those questions, but avoid people interrupting and asking all over the place the customer. All right, so we talked about the structure. In order to build interview scripts, think about 3 steps, or kind of, as they say in Hollywood, three phases of every story: beginning, the middle, and end. For customer interviews, it's introduction, where you want to introduce yourself, the goals and expectations for the interview. Then you want to move into the research phase. This is where the majority of your questions about the problem, products, and ranking, all of it is going to go into this category. And then in the end, you want to have 3 to 5 minutes to summarize and to align on the next steps. So first, let's talk about the interview. First, as you get on the call, quickly introduce yourself, what you do, and if you have any information or you work with this particular person and previously, you can mention that your goal here is to build rapport. Second is part of the introduction is to review interview goals and expectations. For example, I would say something like the goal for this interview is to get your perspective on how do you conduct customer interviews, and it's going to take us about 20 minutes. And the last part before moving into the interview itself, I would ask if they're okay to be recorded, and I would share that this information not going to be shared with anybody outside. It's going to be used for internal purposes, and it will help me to be very actively listening to instead of making notes. Then ask the interviewer, the third piece of the introduction is asking person you're interviewing to give you like a 2-minute introduction who they are. Typically, I'd like to ask him, hey, tell us quickly about your career, tell us about your responsibilities or your day looks like what are the pressing challenges. So this is a way of like moving into this sort of the research stage. You introduce yourself, you set at this stage, you ask to be recorded. Now, like you let them introduce, they introduce themselves, you kind of have a few questions to warm them up, and then you're moving into research section. Well, one of the tricks or one of my favorite ways in terms of kicking research with a customer is to ask first a process related question. Tell us about how you're doing blank. This is good way to kick off because it's a high level. So for example, when we were interviewing the engineering managers, because we were building code review tests, we get on the phone. The first thing we're like, hey, tell us high level of how your process of hiring engineer works right now. And this would allow us to do a quick high level fly, understand what the process looks like. It was a process related question. Tell me about your process of doing X. Tell me about the last time you did X or the problem you're trying to solve. What is the hardest thing about X, pain or problem you're trying to solve, and why it was hard. Then slowly you want to move into product related questions. So I have a few examples of product related questions here, like what, if anything, have you done to solve this problem? Alternatives, hierarchy of problem and pains. So this is related to kind of understanding of are they aware how urgent this problem is? What don't you like about the solution you have tried? Tell us about your most pressing challenges. How about your problems, the rank them. Tell us about the last time you had to do something. Tell us who else is involved in the process and in what capacity. Tell us what challenges you face when doing blank, and what are the 3 top overall problems that you might cure. So those types of problem-related questions that I like to structure next in this research. And again, I think there is quite a few examples of project-related questions here that you can use. And since this is the most important element, you might have a different variations of the questions, and depending on what your business objectives and what your research objectives, you can pick one of two or three. But this is where you want to spend a lot of your time. You ask them first about the process, and now the majority of time you're digging into the problems you're trying to solve. Now, I want to quickly discuss the tips for creating effective interview questions. So at the end of the session, you will be able to create your interview script and complete strategy doc, and you'll be ready to go and start booking your interview calls. So I want to give you a few reminders and a few tips. First, ask open-ended questions and limit closed-ended questions in your interviews. As we discussed, the most important part of the customer interview is to learn things that you don't know. And if you're going to ask yes or no questions, you will have less opportunity to get insightful information. So you want to get to the stories. Number two, use tell us about the last time versus what and how. Well, there's a great book, Everybody Lies, that basically talks about how sometimes when we ask how we do things and what we actually do are different because we want to appear better than we are, or we want to appear smarter, or we want to appear that we make more logical decisions. And often when somebody asks you why you buy this car, we tell them, well, because it has good miles per hour, has a gallon per hour, for example, but at the end of the day, you might bought this car because the color was red and you like the red color, and then you figure out a way to think and structure that so that when somebody asks you why you buy the car, you actually mention something else. So when you tell us about the last time, you're talking, you are probing for stories, and the customer will be enticed to go back in time and to think about the specific story to showcase what they have done differently. Number three is look at the problem to solve and successes to replicate. We talked a lot about analyzing the problem and the pain of the customers, but also as a part of this process, you're going to be looking, I would say, sometimes you will be able to find some target audience, or you'll talk to the customer, to the prospect that already have some sort of idea how to solve this problem. And some of them have actually been maybe very successful in solving this problem. So this is an opportunity for you to replicate what one customer done for themselves to the other customers you might have. And that's an important feedback to analyze. Then don't ask what features to build. Again, don't ask what product to build or how do we make this product better. This is your job. Again, focus mostly on the problems. Number five, leave your beliefs at the door. Don't ask leading questions. An example here is it is so difficult to track content ROI, isn't it? So this is a bad question, right? You already give the answer to them, and at the end of the day, it's also yes or no question. So it's a closed-ended question, and this is a closed-ended question with already projecting the answer you want to have. All right, so number six, talking to people that are easy to talk and not those who you need to talk to. Well, if you're trying to solve the problem that occurs for a C-level executive, and it's very hard to find those people, interview them, you might incline to actually go down the line and talk to somebody else. But understand that the audience you're trying to select for the interview needs to be one that gives you the biggest opportunity to improve your understanding or to improve your requirements for the product you want to build. But don't just try to talk to somebody who's easy to talk. You want to talk to people who would give you more information. Don't forget to probe for budget and urgency. You want to know if the company has a budget to solve it and they have an urgency. So don't forget to probe that. Don't ask double-barrel questions. So double-barrel questions when you have two questions in one, and just try to be very simple and just ask a question, get the answer, ask another question. And number 9, don't expect to get direct answers. So look for context. Sometimes you're not going to get direct answers and you want to basically go and ask a few follow-up questions. I do want to point out that early in my experience of conducting customer interviews, sometimes I would get on a call and I ask a question, and I'll get so excited that the answer that the customer gave to me is aligned with my own view, and I would just jump on it, and I'll be so excited. Oh my God, this is like, yes, I agree. This is exactly why we're trying to do X and Y. And I was just gonna say, just avoid that. This is I know it's going to be difficult. I know you want to fill the void, but try to avoid projecting your emotions and your feelings on this interview with a customer or on their answer to your question. All right, so the last step here today, it's time to compile the customer interview strategy. And the customer interview strategy is basically a combined doc with that talks about the goals for this customer interviews, what are the business objectives, the research objective. You're going to have your hypothesis stated with a probability. Then I suggest you outline specifically who's your target audience, how many people you want to interview, are they the customers, the prospects, or both. And make sure that you discuss who they are, what their job titles, outline whether decision makers or end users or influencers, or you want to have a combination. Make sure that you quickly put together what's the format of this interview, how long it's going to take, is this offsite, are you going to offer incentives, who's going to be part of this interview process, is it just you, somebody else. I typically like to include the resource link to the resource because I'm going to have a doc where I'll list the targets that I want to reach out and I want to get. And then I'll have outreach templates, and then I'll probably going to have a link to the folder with the recorded interviews, and then I'm going to have a link to the summary table where I would put together names of everybody that I have interviewed and some notes that it will be easier for me to follow up or to dig information from the recording. And the final piece of the strategy outline is actual interview script. And as we discussed today, the first one is introduction. Quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what you're trying to do, what the goals and objectives, and ask to be recorded. I would say in my experience doing over 300 interviews, I think there's only one time where somebody declined to be recorded, but most of the time people are okay with that as long as it's not going to be used publicly. And then there's a set of questions that you want to highlight that you want to ask to warm up the interviewee, and basically move into the research interviews themselves. And this is where you want to put some questions around the process related questions, so you can kick off this research. And there's a couple of examples here that I'm using. Then you want to talk about the problem. I like to start something around context. Then I try to dig deeper into the problem. We talked about awareness, urgency, frequency. We talked about 6 different ways to analyze problem, like what are the objectives, what are the alternatives, the key KPI success metrics. So put it all together, and you don't have to put the question types here like I do, like ranking questions, so success to replicate, alternative universe. Over time, it would be just questions, but here I just giving you an example of those so that when you create your own interview script, you have an idea of how to structure, how to put it together. And another few examples of how to put problem questions together: frequency, availability, withdrawal. We talked about projective techniques. Put a few of them in your interview script, see how they perform and which one, depending again on your business and research objectives, they want to use for a particular customer interview. Then talk about the changes that they might have in an organization. Sometimes it's helpful as well. We talked about success factors, how the customer will evaluate success for you solving this problem. Scalability is what, if anything, have you done to solve this problem? Like what are the alternatives and what are the solution you have tried? And the last part is closing. And typically, if the interview goes like over close to 5 minutes before it has supposed to finish, say, hey, I want to be respectful of your time. We have a few minutes left. Let me just ask 1 or 2 quick questions, and then we'll end, unless you have some extra time that you can give me, 5 extra minutes if we can go over. And then in some cases, you're going to find some interviewers to be very useful and important, and you might be asking them if they were willing to have a more in-depth discussion more. And then this is where you can offer them some incentives. But in some instances, the information that will provide it from the people you're interviewing could be extremely important so that you can create another interview with them. So the homework for you after session 2, you now know everything you need to know in order to create script, in order to prepare yourself for interview. Now you should be able to create a customer interview script and the template. Please, I encourage you to take this as an exercise. If you have an upcoming customer interviews or have a problem you try to investigate, this is a great time to take all the information we discussed in the last 2 sessions and put together the strategy for customer interview process. And that includes scripts. That would be a structural way for you to conduct those interviews. Well, quick reminder before we finish today, like, subscribe if you find this information helpful, and leave questions in comments and get templates that will provide. Next time, we're talking about how to set the interviews. I'm going to share some of the templates and reach out templates. We're going to talk about conducting interviews, like how do you manage the actual interview on the phone and how you drive the conversation. And finally, we'll discuss how to summarize and analyze customer interviews. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.